Hello, everyone in the big wide world. And it's the new year. It's February. January's already gone. It's time to move on. Things are happening at a fast pace. And I'm sure if you're looking for a job in the architecture market, you know that it's so much is going on. And perhaps if you're the client, you've realized that the situation's also changed and finding people can be really difficult. Well, I'm joined here today by some colleagues. I guess you could say colleagues. Fellow recruiters, fellow professionals in the field, and we're going to have an open, frank, honest conversation about the current market, as well as learn about what they're up to as well. So on that note, I'm going to do a little introduction. So I'm joined here virtually, I think it'll be this side when I edit it, with Hannah Brooke. And Hannah is currently on Renaisi. Have I said that correctly? Renaisi?
You have.
Very, I like the name. I like the name Renaisi. And I'm also joined here by Marwah Aziz, who is at Aegis. And have I said that right as well?
It's Aegis.
Oh, almost did it. It's Aegis. Okay, damn.
We'll change it. We'll change it. Steven seems like you don't like it. We will change it.
No, I love it. I'm the one that needs to change and adapt. And so it's great to have you here. Perhaps, Hannah, you can tell us a little bit about what you currently do and how you're involved in architectural recruitment.
Absolutely. So, like you said, I work for Renaisi, and Renaisi is a social enterprise. So we're based in Hackney, and we do all sorts of amazing stuff. But it's the mission or the vision is all about creating the conditions for communities to thrive. And so employment is a massive part of that. And so I run their transitions employment service.
Amazing.
Which, yeah.
No, I love it. And I was going to just do a little virtual clap there. I don't know if you guys can hear that. But I
can hear that. That's great.
So it's a social enterprise, and we'll make this distinction just before we go in, because I've actually worked. I know I used to be a part two in the industry, and I've worked with architecture practices hiring. But in terms of recruitment, I've always been in the private sector. Now, Hannah, a social enterprise, that's a little bit different, right, than the companies I've worked with. So do you want to kind of just unpack that little bit of information for us?
Absolutely. So the service that I run, Transitions, is all about restarting the careers of refugee professionals.
Okay.
And that obviously includes architects and kind of professionals in the built environment. And so the way a social enterprise works is that we've kind of got an asset lock in terms of our purpose, our mission. Any money we make over and above our costs is reinvested in achieving our social mission. And in this case, it's about ensuring that those that are furthest from the market or underrepresented in the market, that we change that essentially, and we get people and talent into the jobs that they should be in.
Love it. Absolutely. That's really, really useful. And I think quite a noble cause, because having worked in recruitment for quite some time, there's always that difficult transition period. And I guess that's where your title actually fits in really well, where actually people with different situations, maybe they've done amazing architecture in different countries, come to the UK. It's not that easy to get a job in architecture in the UK, in my experience. And that point in between is incredibly stressful. So what I would say, Hannah, is we're going to hold on to that thought, but I don't want to be a rude host here. And I don't know if you can still see me, because my computers they've been playing up a little bit, but I think we're all here. We're going to keep going. But Marwah, do you want to tell us a little bit about what your role is and how you work with Hannah? And I'd love to know a little bit about what you currently do at the moment.
Oh, okay. So I am an urban designer, and I have an architecture background. So I worked as an architect for plus 10 years back home in Yemen, and I came to do my master's degree in the UK. I'm a Chevening scholar, so I came on a scholarship. I graduated with distinction, and then I started searching for a job. I thought at the beginning it was going to be an easy thing to do, but unfortunately, I realized that there was a lot of things that I had to face. How I met Hannah was through Renaisi. So I had joined Renaisi working as an employment advisor.
Great.
Because I was searching for a job, and I kind of could not really find my suitable job in the field, and I was working at Renaisi and joined the transitions model,
Excellent.
and yeah, through transitions, I joined Aegis.
Amazing. Well, look,
And I'm currently working as an urban designer, finally in my field for the past almost 6 months.
well done. You got to. I wanted to squeeze in another clap for you there, and it is absolutely brutal, isn't it? Making that transition at the start, and I think that while the opportunity is always there, and I've seen lots and lots of people, talented people like yourself, get the role in the UK. There's like a few months where you're like fighting almost for it, and it can feel lonely. It can feel stressful, and I imagine at the time when you were doing the search, sometimes you speak to recruiters, and it's quite. People try to help, they don't really have enough time, and you're kind of in between, and you're not really sure. You're getting all the answers from employers. And did you find yourself hitting that brick wall initially then?
I mean, yeah, I think after 6 months of searching, I realized that I must have been doing something incorrect, because I was always hit by the wall, as you said. And at times when I was successful to get an interview, I still was not able to secure the job, even though at times I thought I nailed it in the interview. Like I would get feedback from the employer saying, okay, you've done great, but unfortunately you lack the couple of years experience in the country. And it was kind of a dilemma. I'm like, okay, and how am I supposed to get that couple of years experience if I'm not working? But I have experience from overseas, like I am an architect.
Yes.
And they would say, no, that's disregarded. And I'm like, okay, so, and unfortunately at a point I was already kind of applying for entry-level jobs, and I still was not able to secure a job.
Wow.
Because I was considered overqualified. And then when I applied for the jobs that are suitable for me, I was told that I'm underqualified. And it was kind of very, very stressful, because honestly speaking, like after I graduated with distinction, I was like, okay, so I've got a master's degree from this country. I speak 3 languages. I've got 10 years experience. I think I'm a great add to any company. So I thought that it would just take me 6 months to secure a job in my field. Unfortunately, that was not the case. And even though I went to networking events and I kind of tried as much as I could to break all these barriers in a way or another, but I would say that for overseas refugees in particular, it is just, I mean, we just have other layers of barriers and difficulties. For example, the fact that our degrees in architecture are not recognized in the UK. We can be, for example, professional architects that have been working for 10 years, but that is not, recognized in the UK. So all that was just extra, extra barriers for us.
Yeah, well, bless you. Well, look, you came out fighting spirit, and I get to use my like fighting noises, so you kind of like, you broke through it, right, and you did it. And so what I think, if anyone's going to take away anything from this podcast, and if you are in that difficult situation of looking, is that I do think if you keep going, you will get there. And it is a shame it's that difficult. And I have seen people in that position. So first of all, well done. Proud that you got there. And that's maybe what we can do together as a team here is we can, and I think for what would be awesome to do is to establish those barriers. And I'll tell you a few that I've seen, and maybe Hannah, you can give me your insight as well, Marwah, because there's probably people listening, and if they hear those barriers, they'll be like, oh yeah, that's what I'm feeling. Maybe they aren't feeling so alone. So I think the first barrier that I see the most, which is exactly as you hit the nail on the head, is the catch-22 of you need UK regulations. You need UK regulations. So it's chicken and egg, because to get the job, you need the UK regulations because that's what they're looking for. But you're also very transparent. You don't really have those. And then that's kind of like this self-perpetuating barrier, isn't it? It's like, well, you don't understand UK building regulations. And I think that, and one of the ways that I've seen around this barrier is that there's some architecture practices and urban designers and other companies which do maybe overseas work, and that can be a nice transition. And especially if you speak different languages and you understand different cultures, that can be advantageous. So some examples will be companies I know like WATG, which do, beautiful hotels overseas. But then also what I've seen some success with as well is speaking to employers in REBA stages, but maybe you haven't necessarily done the UK, the work in the UK. So that kind of shows that you're familiar with what the REBA work stages are. You understand that you're familiar with the culture, and that will go a little bit to debunk this nagging thing in the interviewer's head of, oh my gosh, no UK building regulations. But I mean, Hannah, do you want to chip in on that, or Marwah as well? Is there any thoughts around that subject? Hannah, perhaps you've seen people who have experienced this, clients and stuff. I mean, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, Marwa talked eloquently there about a number of barriers, and you're absolutely right. And in terms of the advice you've given around overcoming that particular barrier, I think that's spot on. Something that we've been developing and doing more of is mentoring as well. So
Great.
we're connecting individuals to people in their fields where they can absolutely
cool.
advise on those steps that you take exactly to get accreditation, to join a particular membership, probably like RIBA, etc. So we definitely see that as a way of overcoming that. I think the issue is then that, and I'm sure this will resonate, but as the kind of job search goes on and it's unsuccessful,
right.
So our candidates in particular, I guess it for early stage kind of individuals that are kind of born in the UK, it's the same, but for our guys, it's the career gap gets longer, and the longer it gets, that in itself
and
becomes a barrier.
You're like, oh my gosh, I've been out of work for a while. Will that be seen as a negative? And
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, again, for our candidates, it's through no fault of their own. So sometimes the forcible relocation has impacted on that career, obviously. And then the asylum process it takes. So actually applying to get permission to work can take years now in a sort of post-pandemic world. So you've got a situation where you're not working in your field. Suddenly those skills in terms of the latest software, you're not going to have access to that necessarily.
Yeah.
And Marwa, you can probably speak about that in a bit more detail. But we see that as a big issue.
Very interesting. I mean, Marwa, is there anything around that point of the barriers that you'd like to expand upon?
Actually, I'd like to just expand on the building regulations point that you've mentioned.
Yeah,
Stephen.
please do.
I think I've taken kind of like a different path because I did sustainable urban design in my master's, and I wanted to pursue an urban design career. But in the end, regarding building regulations or learning about planning policies, or as an architect, I have the capability to understand these building regulations, and it's just easier for us to learn these things quite quickly. And you can see that in fresh graduates when they kind of graduate from architecture, they're able to understand these things, and it's not rocket science. So I'm just trying to say that in the industry, when overseas professionals are seen as people who are not familiar with building regulations, but they can be familiar quite quickly. Like I've started kind of learning about the national planning policy. I understand the compendium. I know how to use or how to refer to SQL, how to refer to BREEAM, because these things are things that I've learned, and they're things that I've also self-educated in. Regarding softwares, for example, we use back home Autodesk, we use AutoCAD, Photoshop, SketchUp. I had worked on these softwares all my life, but in the UK people more use Revit, and the fact that I didn't have that on my CV always made it seem like, oh, okay, now you don't have Revit, you cannot really work on projects. And I joined Aegis, and I had a training literally like a week ago.
Amazing.
And I'm working on 3D projects on Revit. So I'm learning as I go, because I'm an architect. I understand these things. It's when you're not an architect, okay, you can be told it's hard for you to learn software, it's hard for you to understand national policy. But when you're an architect, then you already have that mindset. So I'm just trying to say that it is so unfortunate that so many people are being forced away from the industry just because they have different credentials or different certificates or different, experiences. I think it is quite important to include all these people because they will contribute to the society, they will contribute to the industry, they will contribute with everything that they know, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they will learn quite quickly and integrate. So, yeah.
I think well said, to be honest. I just noticed like my light here, I've got no control of the light. So it looks like I've got the holy light come down, but as long as you guys don't mind, I don't mind too. And look, well said. And I think that there's a number of things going. It's interesting. It's like it's getting the employer to get past these nervousnesses that pop there, which on one sense I can understand as an employer. You would be conscious of these issues, but at the same time, as you quite rightly pointed out, Marwah, you've done this before in another professional capacity, so there's no reason why after a little investment you can't do it again. And then you unlock that person's talent and that can be used. And why would you not want people from different cultures, people, different diversities, different ethnicities? That kind of adds in the greater scheme to the strength of the office. So it's like going around that. And what I quite like about this scheme and what I quite like about as well what you're doing, Hannah, is that you're actually patient enough to go through this. And I think that what it might be worth talking about is I think that the current status of recruitment, and while we were just talking about before the podcast, I was talking quite candidly about recruitment, is that sometimes I think that one of the misconceptions I see is that you'll have a fantastic architect who's just come to the UK and looking for a job, and their natural reaction is to speak to a recruitment consultant. And I think 99.9% of the time, the recruitment consultant is the person that's probably not going to be able to help them. I know it's slightly different with what you do, Anna, but in a private recruitment company, I'd normally get like a brief from a client to find a hard set of skills. So at another company, so typically you might be trying to find a BIM manager to work in the current role as a BIM manager who's maybe been a BIM coordinator or a BIM manager at a company, or it could be that I'm looking for an architect who's just worked on hotels. And what happens is loads of people ring up the recruitment consultant and they don't really have the time to deal with the current person's situation, and whether it could be a combination of things of out of politeness, or they don't really want to say, oh, I can't really help you right now. And what happens is that I think that people call up recruitment consultants typically before these kind of social enterprises, and they don't really get the guidance that's needed. And then you kind of, the candidate who's looking for a job feels a bit unsupported and lonely. And really, they've kind of got to go out there and fight and approach companies direct. So did you have that experience initially when speaking to recruitment consultants, Marwah?
I did actually. I think it was for me the fact that I every party there I try to kind of apply for jobs through.
Yep.
Asked me to go back to the other party, if it makes sense. Like I applied in the public sector, that was told, okay, we really cannot hire you. You need to go to the private sector. And then I started applying in the private sector, and I was kind of asked to maybe seek the help of recruitment agencies. And then when I did, recruitment agencies told me, I think we cannot really
can't help you
because you don't have the couple of years experience again. And it just seemed like
you're getting trucked around. I
was in this fair all alone, trying to understand, like, okay, so how does anybody work in this country?
Yeah.
And at a point, I even started kind of like doubting the fact that I can work in the UK. I'm like, maybe they're doing something like, extraordinary in this country that I cannot do. And that's why you rightly said recruitment agencies are not ideal for people with a set of barriers, because
Yeah.
you need, let's say, a career advisor,
Yeah.
someone who's able to kind of understand what you need and what the market needs, and liaises between both of you, if it makes both sides of it make sense.
Yeah.
Like what public practice is doing at the moment, because public practice as an organization understands that there's a lack of designers in the public sector, and there's a need for designers, and they're liaising between finding those designers and bringing them to the public sector for the good of urban design
Yeah.
and regeneration projects and so on. So that's it. We needed. I personally, for example, learnt 2 tips from Hannah in terms of changing my CV format. It was not correct. It was meant to be. It was kind of like the format used in the Middle East. And that's why I was not always getting, to interview stages. And in interviews, for example, I come from a culture where we say we. So we did this and this and this in this project. So whenever I'm asked a question, I wasn't always able to talk about I or talk about myself.
Right.
So even though I was leading a team in doing something, I would say we achieved this. And that's not really interpreted in the correct way here in the UK. Here, you really have to kind of focus on what you've done in particular in that, in that scenario, and how did you contribute and how did you do things.
Yeah.
So tips like these, we don't get to find them. We don't find people to tell us, okay, this is what you have to do. And I believe it is quite important to maybe not necessarily only have social enterprises that support overseas professionals, but maybe create an app where someone can go and just find all these simple answers to get to the UK market, instead of, for example, I had to work in translation for almost 8 months, and I worked as a social, which was a very good thing, because now I understand the market as an employment advisor. But what I'm saying is, like, I had to spend 1 year and 8 months after graduation working away from architecture, which also influenced me indirectly because I was away from my profession.
Very well said. Look, you covered so much there, and it resonates with me. And that's the truth, because I have predominantly, in terms of recruitment, mainly worked in the private sector, and then I got put on furlough during February 2020. The start of the pandemic. So I was at home, and because I worked in architecture like you, that's where I set up the architecture, so www.architecturesocial.com. And it was like my way of trying to get involved, keep my brain active, and try to instill some of the lessons I've learned, so that candidates who are students and even architects and like talented overseas architects, just trying to get some of the lessons out there. But even now, I try to do content there, but I also now I try to be very transparent with people that when I'm recruiting, especially in the private sector, look, I don't always have part 1 or part 2 jobs, and I always try to say, check out some of the content that I've done, but also, you need to search and crack on with that search, and you need to get involved and start learning from each other as well. So it can be, I'm trying to unpick all that information. I think is super valuable, and I enjoyed it. And that's probably a nice segue, Hannah, to how we met, because I did a podcast, which I think was, I was on the business of architecture, and I was talking about disrupting recruitment, or kind of the old status quo, and the boundaries that as a recruitment consultant you get, and also as a candidate, what you experience as well, Hannah. But so let's maybe dive into a little bit about that. So compared to what I do, the social enterprise aspect is a little bit different, isn't it? So what would be the typical roles that you work on a day-to-day, Hannah? And maybe you can say that's how you met Marwah, and walk us through that process.
My specific remit is actually employer engagement. So we exist, as I said, to open doors for talent like Marwah. You've heard from her experience, etc.
Yeah.
But we also are there to kind of educate employers about inclusive recruitment, about the benefits of all the stuff again that Marwa's talked about, like diversity of thought, this untapped talent pool,
Yeah.
all the benefits that can bring to the sector in the UK and help it to thrive. And I say educate, sometimes we get amazing, passionate advocates coming to us, and progressive employers, and it's a delight working with them. But there's a whole spectrum there, and it's really so in terms of the talent portfolio I've got, actually we've got engineers, we've also got tech talent, so we have a kind of
Amazing.
portfolio of candidates that we work across different sectors. And I think it's going back to the conversation, it's about, we see the potential in them. It's about transferable skills. It's about having those conversations with employers. And what we do is we have a returner placement model. So in its purest form, we will have broker with an employer, that 6-month period, and it might be the probation period, it might be a fixed term contract. But in essence, it's allowing someone to come in who may not have worked for a period of time because of that career gap.
Okay,
It's
cool.
allowing someone who hasn't maybe worked in the UK before, that just needs to orientate themselves in the UK. It's a different culture, it's a different way of working, and it's all being compounded by the pandemic, right? Where you're being onboarded virtually. All of that makes it so much harder when you haven't worked here in the UK before. And so then you've got that individual's got 6 months really to find their feet and kind of show the employer the value they can bring to that organization, and vice versa. And it's a model that works really well. And at the end of that period, we've had last year 100% of our candidates going on to be offered permanent contracts at that point in time.
100%. Well, it speaks for
I
itself,
know.
doesn't it? It's like it kind of works now. And we're kind of seeing it here in the full circle, the fact that Marwah's been a candidate in the process. And I think that's really encouraging. And I think there's a place for that. And that's why I was super happy to have this conversation, because I think that even between recruitment consultants is so short-sighted with this whole competition. Like in theory, we're competing with each other. And I think that's as well, unfortunately, one of the fragmented parts of our industry, Hannah, is that there's this element of, oh my gosh, we're competing with each other. We shouldn't exchange information. We shouldn't share information about candidates looking for jobs. We shouldn't do that, because you would do that with your own team. But why would you do it with someone else? And I just think that's so short-sighted. And not giving information or helping out is also short-sighted. Sometimes, I can speak to a part 1 or part 2. I try to give advice where I can, and I might work with them years later. So that actually benefits me in a way as well. So there's lots of reasons why you should go out of the way and help people. And I love that your scheme is kind of flexible in that way, where it kind of is extra supportive during the start, because I imagine in the client's head, it's more that initial reassurance. It's like, this scheme is halved, and provided that this person works hard and you're happy with it, then they continue. Have you found that what people, sometimes clients are nervous at the start, Hannah, but when they learn about the scheme and what you do, they're actually pleasantly surprised with the zero dropout rate and everything?
Absolutely, and often we'll start from a sort of pilot perspective. We get 1 or 2 individuals in, and then that changes people's minds. You know how it works. They just realise that a refugee architect is another person with another experience, with another set of skills that they're bringing to that organisation. It's as simple as that. I think sometimes employers can go into panic mode a little bit, thinking that it's a kind of very specific program, and it's not. It's people-led, it's person-led, and when an employer operates like that, it fits really well.
Well, that's it. Yeah, what's really interesting about this is that sometimes in terms, and this is just my raw thoughts, and I can't prove this, it's all anecdotally, but what's interesting is CVs and portfolios and covering letters and all that stuff. It's presenting logical information, and if you can get an emotional catch, then that's where people invite, that's where a hiring manager will invite someone in for an interview. And what I mean by this is, it's so interesting that I think people logically withdraw candidates which are useful at the start. So what I mean by this, they over worry once they see a CV and portfolio and go, oh my gosh, there's no UK regulations, maybe this person doesn't have the Revit yet, and they logically rule them out. But if they met this person on an emotional level, on a human level, they kind of believe that this person can do the job. So what I quite like about your system is it's saying to people like, look, I will help you out with your logical worries, but let's see if you will like that person. Let's see if you believe that they're the right kind of fit culturally, the right kind of fit emotionally, their ability to do the job. And if you believe that they can do it, then we'll support you. So, I mean,
Absolutely.
does it
You
make
put it so
sense? Like my
beautifully. Yeah, it
raw.
does totally.
Okay,
It
I'm
does.
not going
And
crazy
in
then.
fact, you haven't. No,
Okay,
you've hit the
good.
nail on the head. So it, I always am at pains to emphasize, and Marwa's had this before, but we are a social enterprise, not a charity. Our candidates are our talent, they're not beneficiaries. It's about meeting a business need. We plug your skills gaps, we're providing you with talent, we're supporting you in your kind of diversity and inclusion aims, with your social value. There are all of those business benefits, but it's not about just doing the right thing, albeit it is just doing the right thing. So there is a kind of responsible business case there, but it absolutely makes sense on a kind of bottom line, triple bottom line, whatever way you want to kind of refer to it. So
Okay,
yeah.
cool. I mean, and I love it. I'll give you another clap because I think it's so important. Now, I need to learn as well on this podcast, and we can learn live. And if I embarrass myself, it's okay because it's my podcast. I'll be responsible for embarrassing myself. So the Architecture Social is it's my own private company, and recruitment pays the bills. It keeps the servers on. It pays for my monthly outgoing costs. I enjoy recruitment, but I'm upfront about what roles I'm working on, and I try to do a lot of group work and mentoring on the community. So I'm a private business which does social staff. But what is the difference between a real social enterprise compared to what I do in the Architecture Social, so I can distinguish and I understand what you mean when you say it's social enterprise?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if it was just reflected in your deed, as it were, in how you set up your company, that you have a social purpose, that's pretty much
Oh,
it.
I
As long
have a
as
bit
there's
of
sort of an
that.
element,
Oh, okay, I'm
there you
getting
go.
there. No, I'm getting there. I'm learning.
It's the
I'm not like a, I'm not going to say any names of
no,
other
so
companies, but okay.
no, so Renaisi is a limited company, but it's, as I said, it's written in our kind of I've forgotten the word, which is why I'm struggling here. Anyway, but it's written into the
Like the
makeup of the
pact, the
business. That
agenda, the narrative. I had
yeah,
I had a mentoring session with because I work quite a lot with Accurate Larry. I do their internal talent and Accurate Larry's an architecture practice, and it was all about the purpose, the meaning, and it got drilled into me. It's like, what's the purpose of the Architecture Social? And I was like thinking for ages about all the features and benefits, like it's a forum, it's this and that, and Oliver kept going, and it was really useful. Kept going. It's like, no, but well, that's fine. You got a forum, but why is it here? And then I was like, and he's like, just tell me what you think. And I was like, well, it's because job seeking in architecture's terrible and stressful and annoying and frustrating. And if I can make it less stressful, that's his purpose. And he was like, that's a purpose. And I was like, yes. I was like, and that's what I believe in, because
yeah,
it is so difficult getting a job, and most 9 times out of 10, and especially when you're someone that's moved from a country where you're comfortable in your situation, you move for whatever reason, right? But you remove yourself from one physical environment to another, which is different culture, different values, and you can add an advantage there. But during that transition, it's extremely stressful. And what I like about what you do, Hannah, is that, and I'm learning from you as well. It's all about we're all learning from each other. It's helping that transition is so important, and I would argue that it's one of the most stressful period in a lot of talented professionals' careers, I think.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think the impact it can have on an individual's confidence
Yes.
is probably underestimated.
I've
Again,
seen some people kind of. I did this morning just before you. I did CV and portfolio sessions in Bill Studios, so I did that, and that was kind of like my social purpose thingy of the week. It's like, right, I'm going to do that. And one lady hadn't worked in interior design for a few years. It's like, oh, I'm not sure if I can go back to it. I'm like, of course you can go back to it, but it is going to be tough. But you can do it, but everyone can go back to it. And that period of time, the one thing I'd like to add before we kind of have a bit of fun, and you can ask me questions, you can do whatever you want, and we have a bit of fun with it. But the one thing I'd like to throw out there is that sometimes I see people really worry about, like, for example, quite rightly, sponsorship and visas can be difficult. Employers get thrown off. And I've seen some people not mention it on the CV. And I almost kind of think that you should mention it quite early in the process, because there's nothing worse than going all the way down the process and you feeling like you're hiding something. And then, and then you mention it. I've seen some people mention it right at the end. They have a great interview and they go, oh, by the way, I need sponsorship. And then the company kind of freaks out because they don't understand the situation. And that's the biggest thing. It's like a lack of understanding. And then actually, because especially now with the skilled workers, it's actually, I mean, it's not as hard as possible. But if I always say to candidates, if you say, look, I need this and this and that on the skilled worker arrangement, and it's a very simple process, and I know exactly how to do it, and I have a solicitor in place, and if you come and meet me and we have a good conversation, don't worry about that, I'm prepared to go through it with you, then that kind of debunks the issue straight away. And I think that then going through the process, you take the elephant out of the room, and I think that psychologically that is less stressful than constantly going through the process and worrying about at the end like a little secret, which it shouldn't be. I mean,
no, totally. I mean, and just on that point, because and it's probably worth saying, but like one of the light bulb moments we have with a lot of practices and a lot of employers is when they realise that our talent is already resident in the UK with permission to work, right? They don't need visas, they don't need to go through that sponsorship process, and I think often people think refugee status, that's what's required, and actually, Brexit and other events have kind of precipitated that more with kind of other overseas talent, right? And I absolutely hear you, and I would agree with you with that advice that you're giving them, that it's key to get that out and up front, and in a way that's just almost like just a fact, and then moving on, and this is me. Exactly. But for our guys, resident in the UK, got permission to work, good to go.
That makes complete sense. Well, we'll have a bit of fun now, because normally the interview is always one way. I get to ask all these questions, and everyone worries about it. Now, we can have a bit. We can talk, like, there's a few things you can mention, one or two things that you're passionate about, but also maybe you have some questions for me as well. I mean, Hannah, just to jump off, and then Marwah, you can kind of like see what you fancy, see if you can catch me out. Oh, I'm only joking, but you can ask me anything as well. Hannah, from one recruitment colleague to another, is there anything you'd like me to ask or unpack live?
Yes, because I've only really been working in this space since January a year ago, so pretty much all of it, Stephen.
I'm very grateful. Anna, don't worry, you're a seasoned pro now.
No, I think your platform is amazing. I've shared it with our candidates. It's a great resource. I'm regularly dialing in for the little gems, so thank you.
Pleasure.
And I mean, I loved your point earlier just about collaboration. I would love to see that more in the sector I work in, where you've got actually small, charitable or social organisations working to make employers' practices more inclusive across the piece, right, across all the protected characteristics and beyond. And yet there's kind of often it's not rivalry is the wrong word, but it's almost like people are competing for airtime and space and priorities. And I feel that both employers and those organisations need to understand that, inclusion isn't about hitting one or two. It's doing it across the board. And yes, I appreciate there are steps and, and that type of thing. But I think as recruitment specialists or, agencies, we can just help feed into that. We can share ways about doing it, and we can, Building People is a great platform that I'm a part of.
Not familiar.
For people in the built environment.
Look at it.
If you're not, I'm absolutely gonna loop you into that. But again, so lots of organisations sitting behind, working with different groups, from veterans to refugees to you name it, and there for employers and practices to kind of go and investigate and have kind of wholesale solutions. I feel like sometimes we're a bit itty bitty, and I guess my question for you is, obviously engaging with us through this conversation, I'm going to turn it back on you. What are you going to take away? What are you going to do differently?
Well, first thing is I'm going to do research on buildingpeople.org.uk. A little shout out to them, because it looks quite cool. I think I would be really interested in continuing to debunk employers' worries about skilled workers and so forth. I think what would be cool is if there was an area that like employers can go for quick access, how to deal with that situation. Because I had it recently with a company where they just didn't know what to do. And it wasn't a case of they were unable to do it. They just needed a point in the right direction. So maybe, Hannah, there's this bit of space there that we can do. Because that's a point. I think because the architecture social, I've been designing it a lot for the job seeker. But I think the next mission is also for the hiring manager. Because in turn, that loop where more and more information, we can hopefully debunk the barriers. Because a lot in this conversation that we've had is about people that have been in that transition and talking about there's barriers there and ways to overcome them. But the ultimate way would be to remove the barriers with the employers, because we educate them in either the advantages or how to go around the problems. Because, like getting the skilled worker license is £500. It means that you can hire lots of amazing people, but it takes 2 months, I think, and you can speed it up, I believe, to like 5 or 6 months. But in my experience, what happens is everyone wants someone to start as soon as possible, right? And they go, well, we can't do a skilled workers thing now, Steve, because you need to find someone immediate, and maybe we'll consider that. And I think it's like that saying of a stitch in time saves 9. If we can kind of get people to get these like admin bits out of the way, then it might actually help the process. I mean, does that give you an idea of what I'm thinking? And I'm always open for collaboration.
No, it does, definitely. And it's funny, isn't it? Because it's kind of almost up until the point of employment. And I was just reflecting, I probably didn't share enough about our model, but we provide in-work support for those 6 months. We're kind of there in the background, and we have like three-way conversations with the employer as required. And I just wondered whether you think that that's ever a kind of commercial model, for especially where you're placing kind of part ones, etc., whether that would work for you as well. Because I think there's something in ensuring people thrive. It's not just getting them through the door, isn't it? It's about thriving in an organization.
Yeah, I'm open to it. I think I need a bit of educating on how that scheme works, because I'm familiar with the old school model, which kind of has some perks, but also is somewhat flawed. Percentages of people starting, rebate periods, and all this stuff behind the scenes. And I think that's important to mention just before we move on from it, is that people always understand that recruitment services are there, but they don't understand often how it gets paid. And I think that we have to acknowledge how recruitment consultants get paid, because that's how they exist. And the way they get paid is that they get paid thousands of pounds, which sounds incredibly a lot of money, for introductions when the person passes typically their 3-month probation. And you have what's like the equivalent of a warranty period, which sounds awful because with people in their careers, but there is this sliding scale of how much money is owed back. And at first, when you hear it, you're like, oh my gosh, that's terrible, and that sounds awful, and all this stuff. But actually, it's incredibly expensive running a recruitment business, and people can change their minds, and there's overheads and all this stuff. But once you accept how the model is monetized, and you realize the constraints of that, I think then when you're a job seeker, especially at the start, you go, well, companies are not going to pay Steve for me to be introduced, because I could apply direct, and I think that's okay too. So I think that what you're talking about, Hannah, the new model, that reassurance, I'm up for it. I'm always open to it. Do I think recruitment needs to change? Yes. Do I think it can be disrupted? Yes. Do I think my role in the architecture social will help that? Potentially. We'll see. There's sometimes as well, it's not just about me, it's about the client. And ultimately, I can educate the client as much as possible, but they have to participate. And if they don't, they are the buyer. Really, in terms of recruitment, while the candidate, it's their career, it's narrative, and it's a people process, the truth is the client is the customer, and they pay. And there's only so much you can do. But what I think really helps is giving back. I really think that having a presence in the community helps. And I do think the more and more I do this, the more and more sincerity and the more and more experience in recruitment that I have, I can be like, we can do whatever you want. However, this new business model of mentoring people, coaching people, onboarding them and giving them support during the 6 months has a much less dropout rate than the old model. Now, we can do both. However, here's the numbers, here's the stats. And I think that it's an educating piece. So do I think...
If I may say something,
yes,
please.
Jump in.
I mean, yeah, it's I get so emotional when people talk about that. But what I want to say is, it's as you said, quite important to educate companies about inclusive recruitment.
Yes.
And I think it is important for companies to commit to inclusive recruitment. And you know, like, include all segments of society.
Yeah.
Because that's the social responsibility. And as much as we expect from people, and I'm saying people in general, I don't want to just talk about one segment of society
Correct.
that I might belong to. So if we want people to integrate, we want people to reach their potential, we want people to thrive, then we need to be inclusive. We need to see the potential, not the liability. We need to be responsible, not critical. We need to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And it is quite important to ask people their names and not assign names to them. So there's certain things that we kind of overcome and don't see the importance of. And I think sustainability, for example, because I'm passionate about sustainability, I think people kind of, and some companies just want to tick boxes in terms of, oh, okay, now we're green, we're doing this, we're doing that.
Yes, greenwashing,
Really
diversive washing.
Sustainability.
Yeah.
So I think it is really important to be committed to what we say, because that's the only way forward, and that's how we will thrive as a community.
Yeah, well said. And look, I want to build upon that point quickly before you can ask me a question, Marwah. It's so true. It's not about just making people look more diverse on your website. It's like actually like what is really valuable. It's about like how will people learn in the office? How will they stimulate each other? How even like on a practical level, different languages, different cultures, different thoughts, different design processes, and of course you have you can maybe have access to other opportunities that you'd never have before. It's completely illogical to me. If you have an office inferior of all the same people who know all the same kind of people, then you're only going to win work in one area. Whereas, like, the more diverse things go, there's just so many more benefits from it. So I fully agree, and I want to echo that. It's about being ethical, diverse, and inclusive for the right reasons. And again, it's understanding. And I do understand if people haven't learned that yet, but I think it's getting more and more critical for businesses. You can't just keep putting it off. You need to
you're not going to survive, you know. That's the end result, is that you'll fall off a cliff.
Well, I think that these companies will keep going for some bit, but they will catch up with them. And, you know, that's the thing. It's more, because a lot of people, we always put things off with not negative intentions. It's because we're busy. I'm busy. I will do that. Just got to get this one project. Just got to get this one person with that UK regulations for this one project. Then we will do a campaign. And then it's always, what's the word? Firefighting? You know what I mean by that? Like, it's always, I'll just do this and then do it. But actually, now's the time. You know, it's like now's the time to do it. And actually, the companies that embrace these are going to get the best people, 100%. Especially in a market where now there's not a lot. It's a candidates market. So what do I mean by that? There's more people looking for hires than there are people looking for jobs. So you have to be inclusive. Otherwise, you're going to be the bottom of the peg. No one wants to, feel like they're in a place where they're not valued or appreciated. So, that the best people will leave. Marwah, now, would you like to ask me any questions at all or add any thoughts?
Actually, I just want to say this has been a very interesting conversation.
Yeah, is that good?
It's
Good or
less
bad?
stressful than I thought it
Interesting.
was going to be.
Hey,
Yeah, and you're doing great work. Just keep it up, and I hope that you will you will find better, oh, not better ways. I'm sorry, I don't know how to phrase it, but I think you will be doing great work anyway in
wait.
what you're doing.
Well, you know where to find me, and I need your thoughts and
Yeah, we
feedbacks.
already added on LinkedIn, so.
Yeah, we go. Yeah, we'll go deeper, and maybe there's some ideas in the architecture social that we can all do. Look, I think this is a great chat, and I hope that people, when they listen to this, they don't feel alone. If nothing else, that's really useful. But you can reach out to all of us, can't you? So people can find me on the architecture social. I am on LinkedIn. My name is Stephen Drew. Hannah, do you want to tell everyone where they can find you?
Absolutely. So, I mean, drop me an email. It's h.brook, BROOKE, at renaisi.com. And we're at Renaisi. So, yeah, if you look on the organisation, Renaisi and Transitions.
Yeah, great. A client or candidate job seeker, drop Hannah a message, or a client that would like to learn more about what Hannah and her company does, please drop her a message. And Marwah, you're going to be doing all these amazing landscape urban designs and master plans and architecture, and I'm excited to see it. But where can people find you in the short
All
term?
right, so I've got my own website, which is Masdel,
Ooh,
MASDYL. So yeah, Mass Design Your Life, and I'm an Aegis employee, so I'm an urban designer at Aegis, and you can find me at Marwah Aziz LinkedIn.
amazing. I will put
And
the
I'm happy to support anyone who has any questions about how to apply for jobs, how to work on their CV. I've been there, I understand, and I'm happy to help, because one last thing that I need to add, it's quite important to be doing what you love, because it's part of your identity, and it's hard for people to kind of have to do other jobs and end up being in a vulnerable situation, because I think unfortunately it's always, vulnerability is always viewed as being jobless or homeless, and you really need to be so pathetic in order for people to understand that you can be at a very dangerous state. So I believe there's so many people out there who want to be themselves, and it's just hard for them to do so, being, you know, in their own sphere, not able to get or land the right job for themselves.
Yeah, well said. Well,
Thanks.
I couldn't say any better. So on that note, we'll have a clap. You can reach out to Hannah, reach out to Marwah, and you can join me for more podcasts, more information, and get involved. I think that's the key thing. Did this topic resonate with you? Drop a comment, share it with people. If you feel like it resonates with someone that you know, maybe perhaps send them on the podcast and they can tap up Marwah or Hannah for more information. Thank you so much to my guests. I'm going to end the podcast in a second. Stay on the line, guys. We'll finish uploading this podcast. And everyone in the audience, thank you so much. And I will see you
Thanks,
again
Stephen.
soon.
Thank you, Stephen. Cheers.
Take care.
Cheers.